This past Fashion Week, I was lucky enough to attend the Issey Miyake show that directly followed its namesake's passing. Fashion Week is an inevitably crazy time. There's so much rushing around that it's hard to get yourself into a quiet mental state because there's just so much to do. You can see here that I seem a little emotional. Okay, walking up to Issey Miyake. What you're actually seeing is me being frustrated. I knew that I needed to be in a different headspace and I just couldn't make it happen that day. It turns out that I didn't need to prepare really because the show itself was so emotionally charged that I ended up crying a good bit anyway. Stay till the end and I'll show you what I got from the show. When you get into fashion, it's hard to know where you should start. Most people now begin on high fashion Twitter, a specialized Discord group, or in an Instagram inspiration page. No matter where you start exploring fashion online, it's only a matter of minutes really until you're hit with some of the most compelling imagery and video footage in the modern fashion canon. It's rare to have images that can suck in newcomers so effectively and continue to captivate fashion veterans decades after they first see them. Issey Miyake was our miracle. We came so close to losing him as a child when his family narrowly escaped the US attack on Hiroshima, and he went on to create some of the most fluid, beautiful, I don't know. These are really special. When I saw many of these things for the first time, I wanted to ask, how is this physically possible? But I often waited to ask so I didn't break the spell that it had over me. I wanted to be suspended in my looking a little longer. That's what Issey offers. Spellbinding clothes. I mean, I've seen tired people with bad attitudes wearing Issey Miyake and thought, fuck, they look great in that. This runway show was a particularly high pressure one for the new creative director at Issey Miyake, Satoshi Kondo. He's a pretty quiet, unassuming guy. Like, if I saw him at a grocery store, I'm not sure I would immediately assume that he was in the industry. And while Kondo is not new to the brand, he's new to his role as creative director, officially only being in the spot since mid-2019. But the high pressure didn't come from the runway show itself, but from the huge press line that I was waiting in.
Yeah, there's kind of a queue right now.
No problem.
The Issey brand enjoys a great deal of deserved coverage, but as Kondo stood at the head of the line with his translator, he must have known what the long line of journalists were here to ask him. Is this show a tribute to your teacher? And he gave such an outstanding answer to that. He said no. He said that Issey Miyake was his teacher and that he brought him into the world of fashion design entirely. And that because Issey had such a strong influence on him, this show was not a tribute to Issey Miyake. He said his whole life, all of the work that he'll ever produce, that is the tribute to Issey. So before we dive into this runway show in particular, I want to step back and look at the full breadth of Issey Miyake, the man, what he contributed to the industry. Understanding that groundwork is going to help us fully appreciate what Satoshi Kondo and his team are doing right now. Let's look at some of the tech innovations that Issey popularized. We're going to be quoting here a lot from Vanessa Friedman's article in the New York Times because there is no way that I could explain this better than her. This is the single largest innovation that Issey Miyake popularized. Quote, "It began in 1988 with Mr. Miyake's research into the heat press and how it could be used to create garments that started as fabric 2 or 3 times larger than normal, which was then pressed between 2 sheets of paper and fed into an industrial machine that shaped it into knife-edge pleats, which in turn became the garments that never wrinkled, fell flat, or required any complicated fastenings. By 1994, those garments made up a line of their own known as Pleats Please." End quote. This is the stuff that all of us have seen and many of us own. They're ferociously comfortable, they look good on everyone, and considering what you're getting, they're really, really well priced. And the wow factor hasn't gone down. Like, this has been the big impact pieces for the Issey Miyake brand for 35 years, and that impact is still as strong as it's always been. Okay, another big tech highlight. Quote, "And then there was 132.5, inspired by the work of computer scientist Jun Matani. It comprised flat pack items in complex origami folds that popped open to create 3-dimensional pieces on the body." So in so many ways, Miyake was an actual engineer of cloth. His work is the best reminder that designs on their own can be placed into a scientific, mathematical lens and still look beautiful. Shifting gears here, quote, "Next came an experiment experiment involving a continuous piece of thread fed into an industrial knitting machine to create one piece of cloth with inbuilt seams that trace different garment shapes, which in turn could be cut out as desired by the wearer, thus eliminating manufacturing detritus. Known as APOC, or a piece of cloth, the collection was introduced in 1997, decades before zero waste became a clarion call of the responsible fashion movement. Look at that. It's just so fucking crazy. So yes, APOC, important part of his legacy, but also the foundational principle behind the Issey Miyake namesake brand now. So the philosophy that drove the APOC line, the stuff that are these insane art pieces essentially, this is the philosophy that drives the Issey Miyake mainline brand now. The stuff that we see on the runway is largely based on at least the philosophy that gave us this stuff. And that's just a very quick overview. There's certainly more, but for our purposes today, we need to move on to how the standard of high-level innovation is being continued in Satoshi Kondo's beautiful new show, which was titled A Form That Breathes. To begin, this entire presentation is gathered under the umbrella concept of sculptures. In fact, the individual garments were even named after specific terms of the sculptor's world. We have items like the alabaster pants, pedestal pants, the sandstone top. We have the hoop bag, easy detail to miss. This is actually a reference in its name and in its shape to the sculpting tool. And in fashion, we throw around the word sculptural a lot, but in this case, we mean that very literally. Sculptural, like the medium of sculpture. And that tone was set with these two beautiful cloth sculptures that created a sense of depth and framing on the runway. Every model that walked was given proximity by these statues, being between them, beside them, or negotiating with the statues' respective shadows. The sculptures were lit from the inside, softly glowing while models walked. So this season, all of the different looks are divided up into different sections, and we're just going to go through each one so we can understand better how this show functions mechanically. The first section, which was called Torso, was said by Kondo and the team to be the best example of the collection at large. It was made of fabric that looks, quote, solid, like a piece of carved marble, end quote. And it managed to allow the wearer to move fluidly in it, which is the hallmark of Issey's brand. What this section seemed to be doing was creating a middle ground between structure, which was the theme of this collection, and fluidity, which is one of the cores of the brand at large. And that makes using sculpture and clay a great source of inspiration for something to tread the line between solid and fluid. The shape of the torso garment is supposed to be expressed in 3 dimensions when worn and look like a sculpture on the body in the silhouette. And we'll kind of see this same idea follow in these other sections as we continue to go through them. Torso juxtapose, for example, is the same fabric that's used in the torso looks, yet a pigment print was applied by hand to the fabric by the team, which kind of gives the appearance of the texture and plaster-like quality of sculptures. Next, we have a section called Our Coat, Our Shirt. Are you listening? LMAO. Real quick though, if you're new here, my name is Bliss. I run a channel about fashion. We do in-depth runway show analyses, and if you are enjoying this, then you would probably like all of the other stuff that I do. We have a lot of fun here. You should be supportive like my mom and subscribe, and if you really love this content and you want it to stick around, join the Patreon. We have a really cheap student tier if you're kind of short on cash. What that gives you is a lot of extended episodes, a lot of exclusive episodes, and it also allows you to get on the Discord server, which is the mightiest fashion community on the internet. It's so sick. I love it so much. We're like the only Discord server with no toxicity. It's great. Okay, so Our Coat, Our Shirt. This is a new section of the show. And so before we get into why they're called Our Shirt and Our Coat, the fabric for these looks was very different. So of course we know warp and weft, which is the threads that go up and down versus side to side. Most clothing is either cut on the warp or on the weft. Wait, which one is warp? Which one's weft? Wait. Weft, like left. So most garments are cut either on the warp, which is like this, or on the weft. But then some garments are cut on the bias, which is diagonal. So the Our Shirt looks use cotton for the warp and soft stretch nylon yarn for the weft. This is such a good idea to add more room for flexion in one of the dimensions of the fabric, slightly mimicking, through the movement, the look of bias-cut clothing. This enables the creation of the silhouette in these looks, a smooth curve from shoulder to the wrist, resembling the shoulder of the letter R, thus our coat and our shirt. Our coat also uses lightweight, stretchy fabric, which has been treated with a super hydrophobic coating to make it a great raincoat. Super hydrophobic, super hydrophobic, super hydrophobic. Resonant Suit PB, from which we will read the show notes. Quote, Resonant Suit PB is made from fabric that is folded and then partially hand-pleated in a circular shape. The design features a series of circular pleats inspired by life cycles and rebirth. The fabric in this series is made from 100% plant-based source, compared with the polyester fiber available in the market that is made from about 30% plant-based source. This fiber in development uses no petroleum in its source. Introducing this fiber in this particular series explores the potential of the material. So we have some pretty big tech advancements there. Being able to introduce polyester that isn't using quite as much harmful material is obviously mega important. Or in this case, maybe no harmful material. It says no petroleum. And it's plant-based. This is great. So, okay, this is where we get to talk about the elephant in the room. Polyester. And then maybe for that you could be like, polyester. I have spoken at great length about my hatred for polyester. So much trash clothing is made of the worst feeling, lowest quality, pollutingest, I have to read them here, acrylic, polyamide, nylon, vinyl, elastane. Whenever I see clothing, spandex, whenever I see clothing that is made of this stuff, it like makes me want to puke. But with Issey, it never feels like a money grab. It never feels like a manufacturing cop out. I mean, here, just with this new section, we're able to see that they're using it in not only a purposeful, like actual solutions driven way, they're continuing to innovate and introduce new kinds of polyester that are less and less harmful to the environment. New section called Linkage, and we're going to continue with the show notes here. Linkage is a seamless knit series that makes creative use of the roundness and sharpness that appear when various knitting techniques are combined. The fabric is made using recycled polyester. The garment's patterns are created by mixing yarn in 2 different colors. Its vertical bounciness changes with the wearer's movement, reminiscent of a living statue, end quote. And this harkens back to one of the most foundational elements that fashion designers focus on. How is this garment going to move when it is on a moving body? And again, the choice to make heavy use of polyester gives the Miyake team some of the most brilliant movement on today's runways. Back to the show notes. Assemblage is a seamless knit series characterized by its transparency and 3-dimensionality inspired by abstract molded form. The light, bouncy designs feature delicate yarn and combines various knitting techniques. By layering the same material or combining colors, items can be worn in a variety of ways. Next section. Using knitwear, Nude features a graphical representation of an abstract sculpture inspired by the body. The inner panels are made using sheer yarn, creating a draping and 3-dimensional effect in a straight silhouette. The items can also be worn backwards, which enables them to be enjoyed from various angles, just like viewing a sculpture, end quote. Okay, so just to say, when I read this for the first time, I muttered out loud, oh, flex. Lots of designers claim to make reversible garments where you can turn them inside out and wear them the other way, to varying degrees of success. I have never heard of a fashion designer who is just kind of like, yeah, you can wear it front ways or you can flip it around and it's backwards and it's different and you can enjoy it that way too. Big design flex. And again, the very broad inspiration for this show of just sculpture has resulted in a really innovative idea here. This is a great example of inspiration done well. They didn't screen print their favorite sculptures onto garments. They took cues from the experience of a sculpture, actually looking at a sculpture and going around it, looking at it from all sides. They took that idea that's part of the experience of sculptures, and they used that to inform their fashion design process. Brilliant. I can already hear the haters crying out. Yeah, but the ideas in this Runway show are not nearly as advanced as Mr. Miyake's a piece of cloth philosophy. And I think that's intellectually dishonest. By doing that, you're taking the entire oeuvre of Issey Miyake and you're trying to compare the highlights of that entire lifetimes of work. You're comparing that to a single Runway show by someone who's been in this position for a couple of years. The philosophy and the innovation and the drive and the playfulness of what Issey Miyake set up over the course of his life is being continued in a really brilliant way by Satoshi Kondo. It's always very scary when a designer passes away and has to pass the reins on in the business. This is honestly kind of one of those things that makes fashion design very unique. When Martin Scorsese dies, there will not be someone else making movies in the name of Martin Scorsese. We have a really unique thing here in fashion, and it's one of the scarier parts of following fashion is when a designer that you absolutely love passes away or quits and has to pass that name on to someone else. But in this case, I think the helm and the name are being headed up by someone who is very thoughtful, has a sufficient amount of training, and has the desire to continue the innovation that makes this house so great. Okay, you want to see what I got from the show? So this is the show notes themselves, and it's on washi paper, handmade washi paper, and you can see that the words have actually been embossed into the washi. These are super special. I'm really glad that I have this. Also, we had this, kind of a cool little like poster thing with some art. My assumption is that these sculptures here, these like the painting is of the sculptures that they made in the studio while they were preparing to make this collection. And in the back is the same thing and someone's name that is not my name. I promise I didn't steal this. This was laying on the floor as I was walking out of the room and I wanted one, so I grabbed it. A super weird thing is that another one that was left on the floor belonged to Vanessa Friedman, the god of fashion writing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it was hers until I got home. And again, I swear I did not steal that. It was literally laying on the floor and I picked it up by chance and it happened to be Vanessa Friedman's. I was freaking out. My friends, so many people complain about the outros and that. All right, so you need to come give your opinion about something.
What's up, Buttercup?
Isaac is going to also do a mini review of this show.
I'm not letting them see what put my hair down. No.
All right, you ready? You're just gonna stream of consciousness out loud, just sort of like talk about what you're looking at and if it's good and if you like it, why it's good.
I'm not gonna be good at this at all.
No, just tell me what you're looking at.
Lots of dancing figures. That guy is going crazy. It does kind of seem like they're maybe trying to be just like pieces of cloth instead of the people themselves. It looks more like they're just clothing than they are just themselves. Reinforcements have arrived? I don't know.
See, folks, it is hard being a fashion critic.
I don't want to do this ever again. That guy's really feeling his piano though. He's really enjoying it. It's like a Pokeball. All the like things turn into like white particles.
The Runway show does beg the question, where do Pokemon go when they're inside the Pokeball?
Well.
Love you, Isaac.
Bye. Love you.